Boop, 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 boop. This is the Black Russian Podcast, raw and uncut on YouTube. And if you're getting this on Podomatic, just you already got the music and the intro and stuff like that. But for those who don't, this is the Black Russian Podcast, episode 36.
It is.
I am Tion Buku1,
I am Yula.
the Park Wanger. And yeah, we are here live and direct. It's been hard to get time to sit still and do the podcast.
No, it's not.
It's not?
No.
What happens?
You just don't want to do it after a certain hour.
Yeah. So that's just, yes, that makes it the same thing. Is that it's hard to get there in the time, and then we get there and it's like, it's time to chill, do it tomorrow, do it next day, and then there's all types of stuff we do, you do.
There's the gym to go to. There's the
gymmos,
errands.
all these things. So, we're here. We do them when we do them, how we do them, and you guys get to receive them as they come, and we appreciate you guys for listening, and we get the privilege of doing this for you. Before we go into the recap and other things, we'd like to say this. We are not advocates of any particular style of relationship. No style is more or less divine than the other. So we don't care about monogamy, non-monogamy, polyamory, It's all about the energy, the quality of work that's put in between the two people or peoples, and the work mostly we put into ourselves and how we show up to these things. So our goal and what we try to advocate is freeing up from any mandated style of relationship. The assumptive mandates, like assumptive that when you get serious, monogamous is the way and the only way. Or if you're supposedly woke, non-monogamy and polyamory is the only way. The reality is we're probably all of those things. There's some things we're very monogamous at for certain times, then we're not. Then we're more open and we want to integrate with more people. The bottom line is it should be something that we get to choose by ourselves and supported by other people, not mandated because we made a decision 10 years ago to be this way and now we're this way for the rest of our lives. Because reality is we're probably not much of the same person 10 years later as we were 10 years before anyways. So that's my disclaimer, our disclaimer that we usually share. And so we should get into the recap of episode 35, which is our narrative.
Ooh,
yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, take a look. So it was about our narrative. Basically, the lens that we look through when we tell our stories, when we look back in our past, as well as like when we tell stories now about who we are. When we hear things from other people, we a lot of times make sure that's filtered based upon our narrative. So they may say one thing, but due to how we're feeling, how our traumas are, or what narrative we told ourselves, we filter it so it fits that. And so it was a pretty interesting and a good podcast. If you haven't heard it, episode 35. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
I never thought of myself as telling a narrative. I think, I definitely thought of myself as, well, I live how I live, and, when I speak, there's a purpose to it, but it's usually balanced, and turns out that it's not. I think that it's really cool to walk into a conversation thinking that you're just walking into a normal everyday conversation, and then someone takes their time to point out, look, actually you're bending this narrative this way. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just, just take a look, you're bending it. I think without someone pointing that out, it's really hard to understand that.
Right.
And we're usually, all of us are used to our way of telling stories without thinking about it. And until someone points that out, we're like, yeah, no, we're just, this is my truth and this is what I want to share and this is how I share it. It's really interesting to start noticing how we tell things or how people tell things.
Right.
And then just start asking questions. Why? Like, what's your goal? What else is there and you're not saying?
Right.
And I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, you can go pretty far with it, because there are narratives everywhere and they're always on multiple levels. I told you today one of our friends sent out like a Christmas, card with like a whole summary of the family last year, right?
Right,
Which I think
right.
is a really cool thing to do. My first thought is I would love to read the separate narratives of each individual person's story of 2018. You know, because you get that front facing narrative, and
Right.
then there's a lot of different narratives behind it. So, you know, I mean, I think it's cool. A lot of the times, it's really innocent, but then there are times when it's not.
Yeah, and a lot of times, our narratives, whether good or bad, whether we make ourselves always the hero, or make ourselves always the villain, or always the victim. Um, it's not about good or bad, but we usually have a common theme in our narratives. So whether we're talking about this or that, or from the past, or from anything, we tend to color it in a similar way. So when you're around somebody long enough, if you pay attention, you notice their narrative.
Yeah.
Like, I always notice you're always the victim in this, or you're always the hero in this. Like, what else? Like, I always hear this, but I don't ever hear that. Why do you steadily omit that? I notice
Right.
these and that. And it's just more for us to be self-aware. It's not for us to call bullshit on somebody. It's not not used to call somebody a liar. It's just for each other when you're building with your partner or with yourself to have someone point out, like, hey, you notice that you always tell a story and it's always this way. It always ends this way with you being this or that. Why is that? And for us to be able to ponder that. A lot of times, unfortunately, though, we get very self-defensive when someone calls us on things, or I even ask us questions, we get defensive, and then we get derailed into some other shit. The reality is, none of us really see the full reality. We only see our perception of it based upon the way we perceive things, our trauma, how we were raised, what culture we're brought up in, and how we're feeling. If I'm in low vibration, I may not be able to hear somebody's story as good as if I'm in high vibration. I may get offended by something they say and shut my brain off or something like that. So all these things play a role in how we receive a story and how we tell a story. So it's very fascinating to kind of go a little deeper into that and how we kind of fell into a conversation.
And then it was interesting because just as we did the episode, our oldest one was in New Zealand finishing up her study abroad, and she shared her final paper with me, and it was on protection of the nature in New Zealand, but it was told from two separate narratives. It was told from, there's two separate narratives going on and they're conflicting. There's the government of New Zealand that is looks at the country as, being in need of protection because they own it and they need to protect it for future generations. And then there is a narrative as sold by the natives where there is no ownership. The concept of ownership of the land is ridiculous because you can't own the air, you can't own the land. I mean, that's how all native people
Right.
treat the land. And naturally, when you don't own it, you will protect it because it provides you with means of livelihood, and you have this respect. So both, the government is doing whatever they're doing to protect it, but they're doing it from the ownership standpoint, and natives are like, you don't need to do any of it, just don't own it and treat it with respect.
Right.
And it's all good. So, those are two narratives on the political side, and I think there are a lot of, if we start questioning narratives, we're gonna start looking beyond the headlines, beyond any tweets of, certain people, and just start understanding more of what is that narrative? Why
Yeah.
are they doing this? Where does that lead to? There's an agenda behind it. What is it?
Right. So it's good to know. If you haven't checked out that episode, you should. Episode 35. It's about narrative. So that's that one. This one is about, we didn't come up with the title yet, but by the time you see this, it'll probably have a title.
This one is basically, because it's been so long between the episodes, I started compiling things that I wanted to talk about, and we will see what the most prominent part of the episode is, and I'm
Yeah.
sure Tion will use his creative imagination to title it
Yeah.
something cool.
It's like a freestyle poo-poo platter. We just gather, try to do in between episodes. Is just gather, listen, read stuff, talk to people, scratch our temple, row our chin, and Eula is now the one who takes these notes. And then sometimes one of those becomes a whole episode. Sometimes something we have a plan for one episode, and then something happens, and then that becomes the episode.
So nothing happened, which
That-
is in
right?
our world.
That's
is
not the
good
reason
news.
why we haven't done
Yeah.
a podcast.
Nothing happened.
you
This
know.
is good news, and we have an episode to share, but we also have quotes.
Yeah, so we'll get in the quotes and then we'll run it down. So, do you have quotes ready?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can do your quotes. I will find
All
my
right,
quotes.
all of mine come from the Buddha, and one I really want to talk about. All right, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. That one is pretty self-explanatory. I think all of us that try to seek it from the outside inevitably fail at
Right.
some point. Things blow up, and then we're like, oh, that wasn't it, so I have to go look for it again.
Right.
This one I'm really feeling, and it probably is my old age speaking. It's interesting what happens as you start getting older. I'm gonna be 48, and there's a timer in my head, and it's really obvious that I will not repeat today. And that's something new that I started feeling this year, and I think it's one of the most important tools that I found for myself to remember to be grateful every day and wake up in a good mood regardless of what happens. And if I'm not in a good mood, find my way out of whatever mood I'm in as fast as possible, because today's not going to repeat itself. So Buddha puts it in, the trouble is you think you have time.
Mhm.
That one's, I like that. This one is something I wanted to talk to you about.
Yes.
And it says, wear your ego like a loose-fitting garment.
Yeah.
I knew you would like that.
Yeah.
What does that say to you?
I wear my garment like a loose-fitting ego. I do both. It's a reverse. You can do both.
All right.
Because you need room. You gotta change it up. You can't be so rigid about your ego.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a different way of putting it, but to me, it says don't be attached to it. Don't let it be attached to you.
Oh. Like yoga
Like
pants?
cling to you, right? Like don't,
Right.
don't let it cling to you, because, like ego's always around. We've already
Right.
talked about it. You can't, or nor should you, get rid of your ego.
Right.
But you can't be married to it. You can't, it cannot be representing what you are at
Right.
all times. So keeping it loose, like a loose-fitting garment, it's like it's around, but it's not like on top of you.
Right. Right. And what we've been talking about a lot too, is we'll get more into that later, is like there's always a war on ego. And so what happens is when you declare war on someone, they immediately go into defense and they find ways to survive. They're not, and that's usually in the shadows and covertly. If you go to war with your ego's not gonna die. Your ego's just gonna find ways to go covert and sabotage your shit. So understanding that all the parts of our personality that we have are here for a reason. They're part of the team. Maybe just the position the ego's playing may be the issue. It has a say. It should have a role at the table. It should just be the only voice at the table, and it shouldn't be the main point of reference for who you are and what you do. So it's finding a way to love your ego and finding a nice place for it without just eradicating it or just completely making it be the dictator of your life.
Don't wear it like yoga pants.
Don't wear your ego like yoga pants.
That's a new twist on Buddha's quote.
There you go. Wear your ego like a hip hop person in the 90s would. It's like Jabot's hanging baggy and everything, he'll figure all big. Is that 3?
Mhm.
All right, so my quotes, these are: you can't control how other people receive your energy. Anything you do or say gets filtered through the lens of whatever they are going through at the moment, which is not about you. Just keep doing your thing with as much integrity and love as possible. And it's really hard to understand that both as it comes out and receives, because we think a lot of times that we're speaking very clearly, and I can't believe they're not agreeing with me or not understanding what I'm saying. And other times it's the other way around. Like they're saying one thing, and I'm like, the way you're saying that is hitting me in a way that I'm not feeling. They're like, no, that's not what I mean. And what we don't realize is we all have different languages, even though we're using the same language of English or whatever. It's just we have different languages, different use for words. And sometimes you just got to realize, like, you do your best and try to explain, but try to give room for understanding. There's going to be room for misunderstanding and room for clarification without hopefully we're setting fires to each other and getting defensive and fighting and stuff. What's that? Yes.
I raised my hand.
Yes, you
know,
did.
I was
You can be
patiently
called
waiting.
on.
Yes. So the most important part to me that stood out from there is that it's not about you.
Right.
Like we make everything about us.
Right.
At all times. It's really hard to not make something not about us.
Right. Yeah, this is
And
very
reality
true.
is it's not. And that's a hard part to understand. Most of the things that we get annoyed with is when people don't make it about us, or
Right.
but then they make it about them, and then we get upset. Like, what about me? Well, what about me?
Right. So that's a good one. Another one is an unhealed person can find offense in pretty much anything someone does. A healed or healing person understands that the actions of others have absolutely nothing to do with them. Each day you get to decide which one you will be. Yes. Would you like to add on to that?
Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not about you.
Right. It ties into that. And, but being able to choose which one we're going to be is an important part. That's what stood out most to me, is like each day we get to choose. Are we going to be the person that's going to look for understanding and look for a way to embrace and understand what's going on with somebody else, even if they're not giving you what you want? Or are we going to be the ones to, blame, stuff like that?
And sometimes you're just in the mood, and you're like, fuck you.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, chuck it in the fuck it bucket.
Yep.
And then this one is one that I don't have a gripe with it, but I want to add an amend to it. I think sometimes there's quotes that we read that we really feel, and we just move on as if that's a complete thought. And to me, this one needs more expanding. So it says, if we fully understood the power of sexual energy, we would refrain from casual sex. Sex is sacred and to be shared with authentic purity of both partners. Sexual energy is intense and can heal the universe through vibration when two people join together and share their souls together. DNA is exchanged during sex. You imprint yourself on another. Mindful sex is important. And for the most part, you're like, yeah, I'm feeling that, and I am. I think, but I like to go, for one, that's not every beneficial reason people have sex. And at the same time, with your partner, automatically assumes that it's one person you should only be having sex with, and the rest would be casual or a waste of energy or sexual energy. And I have issue with that, because obviously it's still fitting an old narrative that monogamy is the most divine thing ever. And it's not. It's a template. It could be for some. It could be the worst thing for others. And anything mandated, eventually you outgrow. But also, my thing is, why just leave it with sexual energy? Sexual energy is energy. Just like any of our other energies. If we expend our energy in activities and people that are not positive and beneficial to us, we will feel the same way. It's not a good thing. If we spend too much time in idle chatter, it may not bear us the fruit that we're looking for. So we should be mindful of how we spend our energy, regardless of if it's sex, because you can be as devastated or as uplifted through energy, through conversation, or through dance, or through teaching. So it's not that sex is the most divine thing. It can be, because it calibrates different energies in you that arises different emotions. But that doesn't mean it's the most divine. Most people are more moved by words and other actions in sex. Those other things tend to shape our lives much more than our sexual experiences. If you think about it, think about all of our traumas and all of our cultural presets. They didn't come from sex. They came from parents. They came from society. They came from friends. They came from imagery we see around us. So it's energy. It's not just sexual energy. And it's not just sexual energy with a partner. It's your sexual energy with whoever you choose to share it with should be something that is vetted and not be taken lightly. I like the more expanded thing. And also the reality is, sex doesn't always have to be the most divine thing. You can have healthy sex where it's for sport. You can have healthy sex where it's for exploration. I do believe that we should be very aware of the energy that we intake and that we share, but that's more in the intention versus the one or just sexual energy. Get in there, girl.
I think that the argument that you have with whoever wrote this quote probably lies in the definition of casual.
Well, yeah. Well, there in this statement, the context casual is the antithesis of
Right.
divine.
Well,
which
right.
is like cheap.
And then, right. And casual, like, so, you know, a one-time encounter can be super deep
Yeah.
and not casual at all, but it will be considered casual by the standards because, you know, maybe there was not a month of courting.
Yeah. People
and
measure
there's no-
depth with time, which is not always the case. That's another
Yeah,
thing
like,
that, you know.
Yeah, I think that most of it lies in these strict definitions of what things mean. And, you know, everyone agrees with it without thinking about it.
Yeah. There's a lot of coded assumption in that statement, and the gist of it, the root of it is very, very good, and I agree with it. But we have to be careful with how we phrase things because it fits a narrative. It ties into a narrative that depth is and divine is with your partner, and it's over a length of time. Anything less than that is less divine or casual, meaning cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And energy is it's not confined by time or space. You can meet somebody and spend a day with them, and it'll be deeper than you spent time with someone who spent a year with you. It's not just time. It's the energy, it's the purpose, it's the messages and nourishment we provide each other. So when we solely start judging or creating metrics about physical realm stuff, object referral stuff like time. Oh man, they've been married for 60 years. Oh, good blessing. That must be it. Like, time alone doesn't mean that. Some person could have had an amazing marriage that lasted 5 years, and that was it. But that could have been more beneficial and impactful than someone who's been married than a marriage for 20, 30, 40 years. It just depends on what's in it. There's not enough information with just the amount of time that people have been together, or how long the courtship was, or any of that stuff. So that was my little thing. Everything else is in there, and I usually follow and support a lot of the person's quotes that does that. So, yep, that's that. Bam. So.
Where's your transition music?
It's already going to be in there by the time they hear this. Unless you're watching on YouTube,
Oh,
you get the
YouTube.
raw.
Yeah.
You get to see the shirts. You get to see the daily gratitude. You get to see I'm wearing my turquoise Wu-Tang because we're talking about woo-relationships today. Not just relationship stuff, woo-relationship stuff.
And relationships?
Well, yeah, okay. So we're going to spin the ball in Yoda's head. And what is the first thing you want to talk about?
I want to talk about closed state versus open state.
Okay, what the hell is that?
So, as most people that know me know that I ponder a lot,
Yes.
and I like spending a lot of time figuring my own shit out. And then usually when I spend enough time, epiphanies.
Yes, I like epiphanies, but yes, it's epiphanies. Epiphanies. That's true. It could be your own thing. It could be a Yoda epiphany.
I can have a lot of my own
Yeah,
things. I
you-
need like a shirt with my
Yoda
things.
isms. You can be like
Yeah,
you can be like E40, but your own way. Code your own words. It's not on purpose.
All right, so epiphanies come up.
Epiphanies. Oh no, you're
Epiphanies,
choosing to go with
yeah.
that. Okay, my bad. Yes.
And this one, I think is a result of years of trying to force myself out of a state that no longer helped me. And I realized that I get into something that, sensitive, scary, upsetting, and I close down. And when I close down, that's a result of, that's a protection mode.
Right.
I'm upset about something, I'm concerned, I'm scared, so I need to protect myself, right? Supernatural.
Right.
Same way we protect our kids. They get afraid, they run to us, we hug them, and we keep them safe, and they're close. So I close myself down in order to stop being concerned. And that state no longer helps me feel good.
Right.
And I was like, why is that happening? Like, well, when I shut down, I shut everything else out. Basically it becomes me and my ego in an echo chamber.
Right.
And then I cannot work through anything that I need to work through without the end result of that work being, fuck it all, it's not cool, get out.
Right.
But because I've been around long enough and I've learned to not just listen to my mind and my ego, but mostly rely on my intuition, I'm like, that does not sound right. Like that's not where I want to be. And then I realized that for me to get out of that state, the only way that I can do it is to basically force myself to be open.
Right.
So at some point, I gotta realize that, okay, I'm closed down, I'm
Right.
shut down, and now I need to figure out how to get myself to be open. And that's a process. It doesn't happen, sometimes it actually happens overnight, like a lot of my ponderings happen overnight, and like cool things happen when I realize, oh wow, I actually have been, the reason why I haven't been sleeping, the reason why my mind doesn't stop is because I shut all the outside, energies literally out.
Right.
And it's me and my ego, and we're basically having this, party between two of us, and it's just not going anywhere, and I feel stuck.
Right.
I feel frustrated. And it used to be that, like that state resulted in, you start blaming people around you.
Right.
Right? You start being like, oh, it's him so-and-so, him doing his thing is making me feel this way, so let me try and manipulate him out of it. Or, let me try and let him know how I feel. Or, like our natural go-to is not inside of ourselves.
Right.
Our natural go-to is go find the source of that discomfort and go blame them. And that, the benefit of us being together for this long and going through all this stuff for this long is that eventually I learn, and when I learn, I start being able to put two and two together and be like, like the times when I start feeling resentful, and I start going after Tion to make him feel bad or blame him for something, have never resulted in anything good for either of us.
Right.
And I know that, and I don't like it, so what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to invite other voices inside.
Right.
Inside my head. Other voices, other energies, and realize that the things that I'm sensitive to, the things that I'm afraid of, anything that I am running away from is only bad because I'm scared.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm only scared because my ego is feeling threatened. you know, and when I don't get any other input, that's all I hear. But then the process of actually forcing myself to stay open is something that I think I'm learning how to do. And inevitably, it's like like letting fresh air in.
Right.
And inevitably, you know, I calm down, life, you know, gains color again, goes from black and white to like happy, colorful, and gradually I'm like, oh, I can breathe. Oh, life is actually good. Nothing has changed other than me, you know, going from shut down to open.
Right.
So, you know, when I thought that it was really super interesting when I actually was able to understand the difference between closed state and open state.
Right.
And learn when I get into the closed state and learn the symptoms.
Right. To be able to check the gauges
To
to
be
know when
able-
you've merged, you've shifted lanes into the space and.
Yep.
Right.
To be able to eventually be like, oh, that's where I'm at.
Right.
This is where I'm at. Okay, now I know. It's like a roadmap.
Right.
You know where you're at. It takes a while. It can take me 2 weeks.
Right.
You know, it's not like it's not an instant thing, because everything in our beings happens. You know, sometimes everything happens super fast, but usually it's a gradual process.
Right.
And you start, you know, declining, shutting down, not talking about certain things, you know, avoiding thinking about certain things, and then you find yourself in this hole.
Right.
You know, so I feel like the whole, and you know, you and I talked about it, the whole process of what happens is, you know, we get scared, upset, sensitive, right? And then the ego, like our concerned parent,
Right.
runs to hug us and keep us close and be like, I'm gonna protect you.
Yep.
That's the role of the ego.
Yep. So don't worry about it. I got it. I'll
Right.
take care of it. And then all of the voices are shut down. Like the ego's like, look, spirit, look, I have no time for this right now. I gotta make sure this person's safe. So I'm gonna handle this. Don't worry about it. I got you covered.
Yep. Yeah, it's like the instinct of what happens when, you know, our kids are upset, when they fall down. Like we instinctively, it's really hard as a parent to do something other than, you know, run over and do anything you can, whatever you can, to just stop them from being upset.
Right. Right.
And that's, you know, like internally, the ego's our parents, so, you know, it runs to our rescue and everything gets shut down. And then when everything gets shut down, we're really left with the devices that we have inside of our mind.
Right.
And mind, you know, will typically use a very logical approach based on what it knows, and it only knows what it's learned from the outside.
Right.
Like, so all the preconceived notions, you know, whenever we're faced with a situation that is not standard, whether it's your relationship, you know, whether it's our relationship and I'm sensitive, whether it's our kids and you know, I'm upset or concerned or scared, if we close everything down and it's between now our mind and our ego, we're gonna default to what we know, and what we know is what we grew up with.
Right.
So we're gonna go to the standard relationship system. We're gonna go to the whatever parental, you know, guidance we received when we were little or when we grew up. We're gonna want to do what our parents did, and most likely it's not gonna be the answer.
Right. And in that space, what our energy and our feelings are doing, this is based upon our premise that we believe that everything we do is based upon feelings, to avoid or to attain feelings. And comfort is one of the most powerful feelings that we clam to.
Yep.
So in state of crisis, we're looking for comfort.
Yep.
We're looking for comfort. Comfort means stability. Comfort doesn't always mean the right thing. But like she's saying, when you're in a state of crisis, you will resort back to whatever you know that makes you feel comfortable. And for some people, that could be rage. It could be lashing out. It could be blaming somebody else and retreating. It could be not speaking. It could be medicating or whatever. And it doesn't always mean it's the right thing. but it's whatever our default comfort zone is.
I mean, think about comfort food. Whenever we're upset or we're sick, what are the qualities of comfort food?
Right.
They're usually not the best. That's usually not the best food for us.
Right. It's
But-
that quick fix.
But it makes us feel nostalgic. It's something that my mom gave me when I was little and I was sick. That's usually our comfort food.
Right. It's like an injection. It's like, when a kid's really hungry and they're just, all over the place, you give them candy. But that alone doesn't nourish them. It just stops the bleeding enough for then hopefully there's another part to that, which is then you give them food. It's the same thing with, when we have low self-esteem or when we're feeling hurt. Our ego naturally looks for like, okay, how can I take my little kid out to make them feel better right away? Like if your little kid, if your daughter, your son's in a bad mood, or they had a bad day, or their friend had a birthday party and they weren't invited, they feel all sad. And first thing we want to do a lot of times is let's go buy him something. Let's go buy him a toy. Let's go just a quick fix to get him out of that, as opposed to like being able to help them understand that sometimes it's just not gonna be that way. But as adults, we do that to ourselves. So sometimes we may have a situation where we're insecure. Maybe we had a series of failures or cancels or just things that made us feel like we're insecure. A lot of times we will act for a quick fix, which may be medication, which may be I need attention or affection from somebody to feel special. And then we act on those things. And what we try to talk about in ourselves, each other, and share is that's going to happen. It's not always good or bad. It's not about judgment. It's about being able to identify what it is we do. And then at a later time, be able to look at that and ask ourselves, is that beneficial to what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go? And be honest with ourselves. But yeah, so.
I think that, we'll look for a solution to our discomfort. And depending on what that discomfort is, like if we know it's a temporary discomfort, we will go for,
I'd say that again, just that one part. We look for a solution to our comfort.
to our discomforts.
To our discomfort, which is awesome. So we look for solutions to our discomfort, not necessarily to our bigger or deeper issue.
Right, yeah,
Which is
I mean,
amazing. That's deep.
we react to discomforts,
Right.
and I think that we really start learning when we start, when we stop running away from being discomfortable.
Right.
Or uncomfortable, right? But normally discomfort is a signal of, don't do this,
Right. Get out of here.
get out of here, do something that will let you feel differently, that will make you feel happy. So if they're temporary discomforts, like I feel like there are discomforts that are temporary, and then there are discomforts that are more fundamental.
Right.
And temporary discomforts may be, I had a bad week.
Right.
For whatever reason, and then we're all like, most of us, will go and figure out what will make me feel good, what will make me feel better. And, you can rely on other people, you can rely on yourself and decide like, let me spoil myself, let me go do, whatever, go to a hot tub, go get a massage, go just literally get an evening with myself with good food and a good book, and that's a quick solution, right? But then the fundamental discomforts, I feel like when we get into those, and when we are in the echo chamber with our mind and our ego, we look to change the situation fundamentally. Then we're looking at this whole thing like, oh wow, this is just not working for me.
Right.
This keeps hurting me. I keep feeling, sensitive, scared, upset, frustrated. I'm uncomfortable. Let me just shut the whole thing down and go back to what I know.
Right.
And that's more of a major, like, if we're talking about relationships.
That's a hacking off the arm or the limb.
Yeah, that's the, I feel so uncomfortable and I cannot, I shut myself down.
Right.
I have, I am not interested in talking to anyone
Right.
about it. I am not interested in utilizing or unable to utilize any of my tools other than my ego and my mind. So now I'm
Right.
sitting here.
And you have limited resources because you've locked yourself
Right, you
out.
locked
So
yourself
when
in
you
that.
cut off from all the energy that you would need to be able to nourish up to process better. So not only are you cut off all the bad, but a lot of times you cut off all the good.
So then that's the, like, inevitably, like I've had a million times when I'm feeling, a super, whatever, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I've been in this loop for seemingly forever, and I'm still uncomfortable, and then the mind goes, well, just get out.
Right.
This is not good for you. Just get the hell out.
Right.
That's an easy one. Like, you can end this right now. Like, you can get rid of this feeling right now. All you gotta do is get out. And at times it's super tempting. Luckily, I also, I think that's where, I don't know, whatever it is, I don't listen to it much, but there's definitely been times when it is so loud that it scares the hell out of me. It's not easy for me to get out, so that would that's something,
Right.
to
The
be
other parts of your
grateful for.
personality, like, okay, you want to get out? Okay. Well, here's what we're gonna have to do.
Right.
You thought about that, and you're like, oh shit, I'm tripping.
And then by then it's like, you're literally just stuck with your mind and your ego, and of course you want to get out. You can try, it also helps that you always are like, fine, you go do whatever you gotta do, I'll be right here. It's probably gonna take you a week max.
Right.
But it's super tempting. And I really am feeling that, just through my experimentation with all this stuff, is that it's literally like, I mean, it's all of this stuff is pretty straightforward. You get scared, your ego wakes up and runs to protect you, you shut everything down, it's your mind and your ego, and the next step is to get out.
Right. And the problem, so that alone some people may go, well, yeah, well, shit, if it ain't working, you should bounce. But what they're not peeping, and what we're talking about more, is that if you cut and run whenever you get uncomfortable, you're not growing, you're not overcoming or addressing the fundamental thing that's making you uncomfortable, because it's something within. The outside stuff is just symbolizing what's within. So you will repeat that. So that's what happens in relationships. A lot of people will get in a relationship, they'll get to that one point, whatever that point is, where it becomes extremely uncomfortable, and then they cut and run, they break up. Yep. And then they go jump into another relationship without ever addressing or nurturing or healing that issue. And so that's why you find people in loops all the time. Like, they just get in the same loop because their energy is recreating the exact same thing that they need to work on, and they don't identify it, so they go right into it over and over again and expecting a different result, but they're doing the same thing.
Well, because the ego, because it needs to be alive, it will confirm all the fears that we're feeling.
Right.
I mean, that's their job, is to acknowledge it.
Right.
It's the job of a parent that is comforting their child, is to acknowledge all of their fears.
Right, and validate them.
Validate them, and then, and then give them like a quick fix. So the ego is going to confirm that all of our fears are valid, and then we need to protect ourselves.
Right, and a lot of times what the ego will do, through validation, the way they do is go, yeah, it was that person or that situation was the problem. Once we're out of that situation, the problem's gone. And then we get into a new relationship, and then when that becomes the same thing, they don't go, oh my God, I see the pattern. They go, no, it was that person. He was cool or she was cool until this. So it always assigns the blame to the object, but never strings the pattern together. Because
it's always fun to talk to someone, and they share their relationship history, and then, or you just watch your friends go through it, and it's like, you know, it happens once, then it happens twice, it's the same pattern, it happens 3 times, and you're like, when are they gonna realize that maybe it's not the way
Right.
other
There's
people.
one common denominator in your last 5 boyfriends or girlfriends you had. Now, it's a possibility they're all really shisty and they all just hate you. I mean, they're just bad people, but it could be a possibility
Yeah, well, but
that.
you're the one that's making the decision to be with them.
Right, you're still gravitating to
So
them. And
it's
at
the
one point in
same-
time, you thought they were the most amazing person in the world.
And the same, it's not even, you know, with people, it's the same with, you know, work situations,
Mhm.
people getting laid off all the time, people can't find a job, people, like, certain things happening.
Right.
Like, if you're one common denominator, it's probably, you know,
Yeah.
reason to look inside. And then, you know, the flip side of it is the open state,
Right.
you know, and the open state is something that, you know, the high and when everything's easy and things are flowing and you feel like, oh, nothing can happen to bring me down.
Right. I'm just
You
feeling
know?
so high. Yeah, your vibration's
Yeah,
way
you love,
up.
right, you love your body, you love what you eat, like things are happening, everything's great, your relationship's great. That's the open state, you
Right.
know? And then eventually you will start noticing that, you know, you should, that's the state you really like to be in. You know, to me, that's the state I really like to be in.
Right.
And I'm at the point now where, you know, whenever I go to the other side, I'm like, oh, yeah, let me try and get back to that other side
All right.
as fast as I can, because that's where, you know, the possibilities are endless there. Like,
Right.
you're really, I mean, open means open to whatever outcome that day, that situation, the life brings you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's exciting, you know, like, you're like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but, you know, I like not knowing what's gonna happen. It's exciting, I like it, it's, you know, I'm gonna do the best I can, I'm gonna use my mind, and I'm gonna use my spirit, and I'm gonna be open to what other people bring to me, and I'm gonna reciprocate it, and some good is gonna come out of it. I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna hopefully live and see.
Right, and the open state can also be the connected state. And this is where, you know, you're connected to these channels or through mediums that are bringing you the nourishment that you desire, that makes you feel loved, validated, secure, all of our core nutrients that make us feel high or open, or in a vibration where we see positive, where we see solutions, where we see faith in the unknown, we see excitement in the unknown. Now, there's 2 ways that we go about getting the nourishment that keeps us in this higher vibration open state. There's object referral, which is other people, places, and things, right? And then there's self-referral, which is things we derive from within, from things that we do without any regarding any person, place, or thing. Now, in the life that we live, which is both internal and external, it's good to have a balance of those. Sometimes without even trying internally, you can just be feeling high because you may have got a raise, your artist may have been selected to an art show, you may have got this gig, somebody gave you a good compliment, you know, all these things externally can just lift you, and you may not realize, like, wow, that was dope. That's still impermanent. You may not realize that. Sometimes it's harder to maintain that because your car got a ticket because you parked in the red zone, the job you thought you had come through didn't, this person said they were going to book you for the show and they flaked, you know, and nobody on your OkCupid is messaging you back, so you could drop. And so you have to be mindful of your gauges and make sure you have enough things that are self-referral to keep you up there. That's how you have a better chance of writing it at a higher level. Otherwise, you go up and down based upon the strongest winds that are blowing your way. So when we talk about being an open state, it's not a stagnant state. It is a state of constant building. Like, you have to be generating this positive energy, this state of gratitude, the perspective of understanding, and the filtering and translating anger and fear and solutions with positive nourishment to stay at an open state. Otherwise, we all will go down. We all will dip.
So let's talk about, you know, different ways that, you know, you and I have learned to go from close to open, from low to high.
Right.
I have a secret tool that I'm learning to use.
Is it Wiggles?
No.
Oh. How's your vibrator?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
My secret tool is easy. That's my headache.
Right.
I've learned, some years ago I started, 4 years ago, it actually is when we started going through the process of changing our relationship and really going deep, and I started going really deep into my own ways of handling my own stuff. I started getting these excruciating migraine headaches. And, of course, I thought stress, high blood pressure, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah. I just recently, well, I knew that it's had to do with whatever personal stress
Right.
I go through. But I've learned very recently that that headache is an indication to me that I'm entering the closed state.
Right.
And it's just literally based on the energy that I'm giving out,
Right.
and that is a super cool tool for me because as soon as I stop thinking that it's random or that it's blood pressure related or it's something else, it's very clear to me that that closed state causes this headache.
Right.
And then
That's the echo chamber, like the
Yeah.
echoing, probably.
Yeah. It's and then once I learn that, I'm like, all right, well, that's my indicator. I have to stop doing whatever it is that I'm doing, and I have to go and take inventory and be super honest with myself
Right.
and see what the hell it is that I've done to get to this state, and go and force myself to literally be open.
Right.
And, literally be open means I spend time, like super focused time with myself, and go through and remind myself everything that I, have learned to value. Like, what's the ultimate value in our relationship, and how I choose to live my life, and how, like, what is the most valuable thing in my life,
Right.
And I go down that path and I find the open space and my headache lifts. It
Right.
takes a few days. Hopefully it'll start taking less, but that's what it is.
Start digging out.
And, the roadmap is literally to go beyond what is uncomfortable and go into what are my goals? Like, what is it that I'm doing here? And zoom out from a specific situation that's probably an irritant to what am I doing? Like, take inventory of what are your goals? What is the path? Is everything aligned? And, usually it's out of alignment. Usually I'm just like, picking on someone, or, being totally closed-minded about whatever, I'm scared of, and trying to manipulate a situation, or, I am, without being conscious about it, judging someone, and it's gone too far. And
Right.
I haven't gotten positive energy in there, so time to shut it down, which shuts down all the inflow of all the bad stuff. Time to be honest with myself, time to take inventory, zoom out, and then literally force myself into that, open space where good energy flows.
Right. And the beautiful thing about what you're talking about, your process is, and it can be a very helpful tool for all of us, is when we get in a low state and we're uncomfortable, if we own that feeling, like, hey, we got ourselves in this state. What are some of the things that we allowed us to affect us in a certain way to get us to this state? But we allowed ourselves to get this state.
Yeah.
That means we own it and we sit in it. But what also it means is we got ourselves in, we can get ourselves out. as opposed to that person got me in this state. They need to apologize, come back, whatever it is, then I'll feel better, is a very object referral that's slave to that, which means you have no control, which creates panic. When you own it, you now emancipate yourself from whatever symbols outside of you that caused or created or contributed to this state, and you can work on getting yourself out with your own personal tools of internal reflection, acceptance, embracing, and then rebuilding and nourishment and
So
perspective and gratitude. So what I do when I get down, when I catch it, is I check my gauges. Like, why am I feeling this way?
Right.
And I'll go, okay, there might have been it might have been an email that was kind of a sideways energy, or a text. I may have ate some food that didn't sit right earlier. I may not have slept good. I may have had a weird ass dream in the morning that just set me off in a funky way. And so I try to be aware of that, and start trying to nourish before I get into something. Because most of the time, I'm sure you guys will know, and you've been through it too, a lot of times we end up getting into shit because we're susceptible to shit already. Like, we're already a little bit stressed out, we're already short fused, we probably haven't eaten that good, or we're malnourished, whatever it is, we're malnourished, and we're on edge. And then all of a sudden, that leads into not only leads into conversations, but it leads into conversation with our perspective of that conversation interaction already at a lower narrative. We already have a narrative. So if we can catch the fact that, ooh, I'm in a shitty mood right now, I'm in a bad mood right now, I'm not in that mood, then we can catch it and start working on first quarantining that mood. That's what I do. I quarantine that mood. I'm not the type of person when I'm in a bad mood, I want to talk about it to everybody. I want to post it on social media, because that perpetuates that energy. And that gets other people to respond to that energy. And that negative response to that energy grows. So for example, if I got cut off, by a dude in the car, and I go, motherfucker cut me off in the car, blah, 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 on social media, then I get everybody like, yeah, I hate that, yeah. And all of a sudden you're perpetuating negative
your social media.
energy.
My social media is like, oh yeah, I don't like that either.
Yeah, well, that's yours. I'm talking about mine. But most people will perpetuate that energy that we're feeling. And I don't want to live that over and over again throughout the day. So I don't want to talk about that throughout the day. So I quarantine it. I make sure that I'm still finding ways to put out some form of positive energy and love. Because ultimately what I need is more of that to lift me back up. And just try to really be aware that I'm susceptible and I need to eat. And by eat, I mean nourish up through physical or mental, or sometimes even food, sometimes rest, and then come back to a state of being which allows me to deal with things. Now, we're not always that aware. A lot of times we get into shit and we don't realize that half the reason why we got into that and it went that way has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And so being able to identify that and disengage and get back to your space and try to come back to it is something that I try to do, because I don't always catch it. We may not realize until after we've already smashed heads and we've been in it for a while. Then the funny thing too also is about the ego is there are times when we're in it and I can hear the rest of my voice is like, I think we should probably not talk about this right now. You probably don't want to go into that, because like the spirit is a very humble, calm, quiet voice. It never really yells inside of me. It's very calm. And then my inner child is like, I don't know if we should be doing this. Like, this doesn't seem fun. And the spirit's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think, what is our motive, guys? Like, the spirit's trying to remind everybody, like my ego and everybody else, what's our team goal? Our team goal is to build and to connect and to share love. And my ego sometimes combines with my very protective Joe Pesci mother type vibe. And they're like, nah, we gonna have this conversation right fucking now. And my spirit's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. You haven't really eaten, and I can just tell by your energy that your narrative is like you wanna get in that mode, and you can hear it. And while you're in it, and shit's just going worse. Like you guys are like, okay, you go ahead and have that conversation, and the spirit's just watching, and you're just wrecking. It's just getting worse and worse, and you can hear your spirit like, yeah, I told you. Well, hope you're enjoying this, and you don't want to get out because whatever the reason is, your ego just wants to engage in this battle. But at some point, being able to own that, and what we've talked about recently is, it's okay to be in those modes. We're all gonna get in those modes, those fuck shit up modes, or this, I'm like not feeling it. But what we should try to do is identify who it is when we're doing that. So like if I'm not feeling good about something, like I'm all butthurt because of something, it's if I say, Eula, so my ego right now really wants to just cuss you out. Like my ego really wants, and you can go, what does your ego want to say? And my ego will be like, well, my ego wants to say, and what that does, just by saying and identifying who's speaking, it separates your whole being from your ego. But also it gives your ego a voice, which a lot of times your ego just wants to be heard, and without causing disaster. Now, if we don't say my ego wants to do that, and I just say, you know what, I really want to cuss you out, then it encompasses the whole being, and it makes the assumption to her that my whole being wants to cuss her out. And then that's a very offensive thing. Whereas if I just say, my ego really wants to cuss you out right now, and we just get through that, I can then say, oh yeah, my spirit understands, like it's probably not a good idea. So I'm going to try to just go for a walk or something like that. And so those are some of the tools that we use, and I use to get out of the closed state back into the open state. But it all really ties into nourishment and being aware of your gauges, knowing and being able to track yourself to see, I was here yesterday, now I'm fucking here today. What happened? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, what happened may not have been too many external things. It can just be a thought direction. Or if you're trying to undo your narrative and learn a new narrative, but your old narrative is a negative one. Your old narrative is like gravity, it'll pull you back if you're not careful. So you gotta lift back up. It's like learning a new habit, stuff like that. So that's,
I think it's also not just new narrative versus old narrative, but the comfortable, no resistance narrative.
Right.
Versus something that, you have to work through. Like, we're all super lazy. Most
Right.
of us are super lazy. We're lazy and we like our comfort. So why would we do something that is uncomfortable and requires a lot of work?
Right.
It's a lot easier to just go down the path that is natural, easy, and then takes us to the comfortable place of
Right.
fuck all that.
Yeah. No, it's good. And so while we're about to go on this little break, get some cereal stretch. But one thing to think about, and this is for us too, it's for everybody too, think about what is your core comfort. Just really identify that without judgment, and then ask yourself, is that core comfort a benefit to your growth and your peace, or a detriment? I think that's a good one for us to realize, because some of our comforts may be perfect. Our comfort is peace. Our comfort is when there's no stress, or when I'm feeling love. Some people's comfort is like not having to deal with anything, or whatever it is. But being able to identify what is your core comfort, and is that a benefit or detriment to your growth, may help us realize, if we need to really adjust, expand our comfort zones.
I think my basic comfort is being in charge.
Right.
And that's why whenever shit hits the fan, I'm like, I'm out. I'm perfectly fine. I set up my life in a way that I'm fine.
Right.
And that's my comfort zone. And getting myself out of it and putting myself back into the zone where it's not all up to me.
Right.
And it's vulnerable, and it can go in ways that will make me super sensitive for an extended period of time, and to be okay with that, that's hopefully a new comfort zone, but definitely not there yet.
Right. And my core comfort zone is clarity and understanding. Like, the hardest time for me is when I don't understand or when shit's not clear, because then it goes into my mind and all this weird space. My traumas and stuff kick in and like that. So like I look for clarity. Comfort zone to me is clarity. So if I'm going through some stuff and I'm for some reason me and this other person's I'm not getting clarity with their contribution, I recluse and I just go and try to find clarity. And once I find it, whether or not it's benefiting me or not, like maybe I find the truth is they don't like me. The truth is they're not feeling me. I, for some reason, become more comfortable with the clarity
Well,
once I truly can understand
you have
something.
control of the situation. I mean, it's the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you
we
just get there in a different way.
Well, no, there's internal control and external control. I don't look to control other people.
Right.
I just look for clarity.
Exactly.
I just want to understand.
Yeah.
From that, I can work with myself, stuff like that. But the reality of no matter what the comfort is, we all need a healthy respect for impermanence and the unknown. Because the reality is we're not always going to be able to be in our comfort zone. And if we can't function at a high level unless we're comfortable, then we're in for a long, bumpy, weird, fucked up ride. Because it's always going to be all over the place. So, Black Russian Podcast, episode 36, the Poo Poo Platter, Freestyle Mega Mix. Enjoy the tunes. We'll be back in a second.